Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 1 Episode 9. It's called Look for the Light, so full spoilers for the episode. And indeed, full spoilers for the season because it is the season finale. And we got things to talk about. We got things to talk about in this episode. We've got things to talk about for the season as a whole. Obviously, at this point I can talk about anything that's in the first game. Not the second game. If I've got anything I want to say that relates to that, I'll save it for the end and give you another warning. But obviously, like, a lot of great stuff in this finale. There was some great emotional beats between the two lead actors. Their performances were on top, as they have been for most of the season. Episode 6 was a standout. I think both of them have moments that stand out again here in this finale. Because so much of the scenes in this are exchanges between the two of them. And then we have the ending, which is, you know, almost beat for beat just the scene from the game, you know, with a little extra bit here or there. So, extremely good stuff. But one thing that I will say is that throughout the season, I have been repeatedly impressed with how they've handled moments from the game. And I've been impressed with when they have changed things, that they've been for the better. Not that they're objectively better than they were in the game, but better for a TV version of the story, right? Better for this medium. Doing them like they would in the game wouldn't necessarily work or have the same effect. I think this episode might be one of the only times in the entire show where I felt like the choice they made to handle a moment was worse than the game. So I guess just in terms of that, this is probably the episode I'm going to have the biggest critique of, in a way. I don't think it's the weakest episode though. I still think 4 and 5 are still kind of the weakest overall, even though they're full of great stuff. I think this one, it's hard not to feel the impact of the 1 or 2 pacing issues I have, because it is the ending, it is the big climax, and this is the part that you want them to nail. You want them to be as good as it possibly can be. And there's 2 pacing issues that I think I'm going to talk about and how I think it affects the feel of the show. Because, you know, there was a slight concern going into the finale that it was going to be too short, just because we knew it was going to be about 43 minutes, and it was shorter than any other episode. And while there wasn't like tons of events that need to be covered in this last episode, and it kind of hits all the things that it needs to hit, it does kind of leave me feeling like a couple of things feel a little rushed for reasons that I'm about to get into. So, the big thing, the 2 big things with the pacing is basically that because we have all these heart-to-hearts with Joel and Ellie on the way to the hospital, right? They're going through the city, and Ellie is clearly not, you know, she's not back to normal after the events with David. This has clearly affected her. She's quieter, as Joel points out, and Joel's really trying. Joel's really making an effort, and they have all these heart-to-hearts, and I'm going to talk about those because they're great stuff. And they go through like a tunnel, and then they have another heart-to-heart. They have obviously the scene with the giraffes before that, and then very quickly the fireflies nab them, right? They come out with a smoke grenade and the concussion grenade, whatever it is, and take them, and then, you know, within seconds, Joel's waking up in the hospital, and we're starting that entire section of the story. Throughout the entire show, I've said that it makes sense that they've eliminated most of the encounters with the enemies, right? With the clickers and the runners specifically, because it doesn't make sense to repeat them too much. But I do think it was a mistake not to have a segment here, because there is like a part here in the game just before the hospital where you have your last encounter with clickers and infected. And it's not that important an encounter from like a story perspective, but I do think here it would have helped the pacing of this, because I think having all these heart-to-hearts and then immediately being in that part in the hospital where he's waking up and like finding out what's happened to Ellie and making his choice, it does feel very quick. And I think just for the sake of like spacing out the events a little bit and just making it feel like we've had time to digest like the heart-to-hearts that they've just had, I do think that a scene of them going through the tunnel and actually having to get around some clickers would have probably been nice. I think it'd be nice from a pacing of this episode. I think it would be nice because they've been very restrained with how much they've had clickers and scenes of horror in the show. Episode 2 sticks out as the best. Episode 5 had them all come back in that big scene at the end. But they've been really sort of like, they've dialed it back, like way, way more than I think anyone thought they would. And I don't really have a problem with that, but one nice scene with them, like one exciting horror scene with them in the finale, I think would balance things out and make it feel like you got a little bit of them, you know, beginning, the beginning with the second episode, the middle with episode 5, and then the end with episode 9. But my bigger concern is the pacing of the actual episode. Because you don't have that encounter in this story, and there's nothing to break up all of the heart-to-hearts that then lead into the hospital section, it does feel like things are moving at a breakneck speed in this last episode. And I've not really had a problem with the pacing before this, I don't think. Nothing major anyway. Like, you know, some things feel a bit quicker or slower depending on what they're adapting, but everything's felt like it's made sense. The relationship between the two characters has always felt like it's moving at the right pace. This was the one exception to that where I felt like it was like, oh, we're already here. Like, I just wasn't ready for it to already be in that moment, in that situation. So I think that would have helped break up the episode a little bit and give us one last hurrah this season with the clickers and the fun horror stuff that, you know, they really have kind of been restrained with. The other choice that is kind of a pacing thing to an extent is how it handles Joel's like rampage through the hospital to get to Ellie. I think that the show is inferior to the game with how it handles this. I don't hate how it does it in the show, but I did feel a little underwhelmed by it, and I think the reason why it doesn't work as well is because in the show this is actually kind of ironic, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because one of the interesting comparisons from the show to the game is that because it's a video game and you have to kill lots and lots of people, you encounter lots of enemies of both human and infected, that technically, even though you might die and have to do it again and you're struggling to get through it, technically Joel's kind of murdered hundreds or maybe even close to 1,000 like beings by the time you get to the end between humans and infected. And you're kind of like a Terminator, right? That's something that says, oh, that's part of the reason why you don't keep that in all in the show, is because it would feel a bit too unrealistic, and having Joel be a bit more, you know, like have him struggle, have him feel more human, be a bit more grounded, makes a lot of sense for a TV show. The irony of this is that they made the opposite choice with this moment. Joel, when he goes through the hospital killing all the fireflies, he does it with relative ease, and it's sort of filmed in this way that it's like it's not quite a montage, that's not quite fair, but it has almost like a dreamlike quality where he's just going through it, there's music playing over it the whole time, and it's just sort of, it treats it in a way that kind of disconnects the audience from it, I think. It's sort of, because we don't just stay with them in real time as he's struggling to get to her, and it's not presented as this ultra difficult task, which it is in the game. When you play that section in the game, you start off with no weapons, you have to hide and sneak around till you take out a couple of the guys, and then you take their weapons, which kind of happens with Joel in this, but and then you're struggling through hordes of enemies to get to the floor that Ellie's on, and then you have that long run down the hallway to get to the surgery room, like all those things. And in the game, it's one of the more difficult parts of the game. Not the most difficult part, but it's difficult in the sense that they're throwing a lot of enemies at you. It's a bit of a gauntlet, and it feels like a struggle, right? It feels like a struggle, but you're so determined to save Ellie because you're right there with Joel, and you want to get to her, so you're fighting, and you're like, I don't care how hard this is, I don't care how many people they throw at me, I'm going to go through them all, I'm going to kill them all. That's how you feel. And I think in the show, it disconnects us from Joel, because instead of like going on this like warpath where he has to like fight his way through everything, it treats him more like he's invincible, just walking through as the music plays, just almost soullessly just killing these Firefly soldiers. Now, they are firing back at him, but he's for the most part just kind of dealing with them with ease. And I kind of, like, as it was playing out, I kind of had a moment halfway through where I sort of realized I wasn't necessarily loving how they were doing the moment. And it was a bit of a shame, because it's one of the moments I've been looking forward to all season. And the season's so strong overall that it's not like a deal breaker by any means. And I kind of understand what they're going for here, that it wants to disconnect us from Joel in the moment because it kind of wants us to shift to Ellie being the protagonist and her being our main character. But I think part of the reasons why this moment's so effective in the game is because you are with Joel and you do feel the same way he does. And we'll get into the debate of, was this right, was this wrong? This choice that he's making on behalf of Ellie. We'll get into that. But it's not about whether it's right or wrong. In the game, when you get to this point, it doesn't matter if this is technically the right thing to do, and if you remove yourself from it and you say, objectively, is this the correct thing? You don't care. I didn't care. In the moment, I'm like, I'm saving Ellie. I will kill every one of you mother effers to get to her. Because it did such a good job of putting me in Joel's shoes, because I'm playing as Joel and I'm along for that ride. And I think in the moment when Joel's finding out in the show from Marlene that Ellie's going to die from this surgery, in that moment, like, I'm with Joel. I'm like, yeah, go save her. F these assholes. Like, I don't care. Like, go Uber Joel. But part of the satisfaction of him getting through all of the Fireflies to get to Ellie is that it is difficult, and he has to fight, he has to struggle, and it shows his determination, and it shows the war that he's willing to wage to get there. It felt a little too easy for him. And while you do technically go through all these bad guys in the game, you're constantly struggling and fighting to do it. Like, it's a stressful kind of thing. Here it's almost like he's on autopilot, and I guess that they're going for this, like, he's a man possessed kind of thing in the moment, but I don't think that worked as well for me as it being this struggle to get through the hordes and the gauntlet of getting to Ellie, and the fact that he's willing to do it, the fact that it felt so easy made it took some of the connection for me away from him in a weird way. So that would be my two main critiques of the episode. And that's where I wish there was more time. I wish that his fight to get to her hospital room or the surgery room was at least double, maybe even quadruple the length. It should have been like him. Like, there was a second where I thought, is this going to be like a winner? And I think that's kind of what I wanted from it. And maybe that's a lot to ask for, but I was kind of almost hoping that it would go into a winner, like there's a great scene in the finale, and most people wouldn't know this show, but there was a show on Cinemax called Quarry, like 6 years ago, that had this great scene in Vietnam, the Vietnam War, where there's this big just winner of the camera following the main characters through all this carnage, and I was kind of wanting something like that, or maybe something like 1917 is a more popular example that I can give. And partly because, I guess part of the charm, I wasn't even thinking of it like this, but I guess it would also mimic the video game camera, because the video game camera is a winner, right? Not in the cutscenes, but when you're playing the game, it's just the camera behind the character following you the whole way. And I guess I wasn't thinking about it in that context if I wanted it to mimic what the video game looks like, because I didn't, right? They kind of did that in episode 1 with the car, like when they're in the truck driving from the house to the town, they kind of mimicked that over the shoulder thing there. But I was kind of expecting, as he was walking up the stairs after he killed the first two guys, part of me was almost thinking it was going to be this winner that would last a few minutes of him, ducking, reloading, shooting some guys, finding his way to the room and making that journey. And part of that may be, and this wasn't something I was thinking about before in advance. This was just literally in that scene as he was walking in, because the camera was following him from behind as he was going through the door. And then for a second I thought, oh, are they going to do this? And I got kind of excited. So part of it maybe is on me for leaping ahead into an assumption. But it didn't need to be that. But that was something that I thought they might do. And certainly the feeling of that is kind of what I was thinking that they'd want to go for. And certainly what I felt when I was playing that section. So I guess that's the problem for me here, is that everything else that they changed or they did something differently was done to evoke the same feeling that I got from the game in the context of a different medium. Here I felt like they created a different feeling, one that didn't jive as well with me as it did in the game. So I'd be curious what the perspective of someone who's never played the game feels about how they handled this section. For me, it was one of the most disconnected moments I had watching the show because I just felt like they made the wrong choice. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear from people who like did this just completely work as him being this unstoppable kind of almost like he became superhuman for 5 minutes. It wasn't even 5 minutes. That was part of the problem, was it felt too quick. It felt too easy. It felt like, you know, if we're going to devote the entire last episode to just this part in this city at the end of the game, like that was the part I thought was going to be their big impressive sequence. Not that I come to this show thinking it's going to be an action show, but I thought this was a scene that called for more of an impressive action scene. So impressive. I said that. I was almost Sean Connery-esque, which I as a Scotsman, I don't want to fall into that trap. So that's the stuff that, you know, I wanted to get out of the way, because everything else, obviously, it's a weird thing discussing just the main story beats in a weird way, because I have played the game and I knew what they were going to be, right? I knew Joel was going to have this choice. I knew Ellie was going to be killed if she gets worked on, and that Joel's going to go and save her, whether or not that's what she wants. I think what's interesting here, though, is that the show does add a couple of little details into it that make it a bit more clear. In the video game, the surgery that they're going to do on Ellie that will definitely kill her, it doesn't feel like it's a surefire like path to success. Like, it's kind of like it might help us find a cure, but I think they even implied in the game that there'd already been like other immune people that they'd tried this on and it failed, and this was like an attempt. So it almost made you side a bit more with Joel just inherently because of that, because it was like, wait, you're going to kill her and you've already tried this before and failed. In the show, it specifically does a couple of things to make you think that it probably will work. One, they better explain how the cure works and where it's coming from in Ellie's body. And the other part of that, of course, is the flashback at the start of the episode that shows you Ellie's birth. And of course, her mother's played by the actress who played Ellie in the game. So Ellie from the game gave birth to Ellie in the show, which is kind of a neat thing. And there's a little moment where she drops an F-bomb after she's delivered the baby, and I just like, oh, I can hear Ellie. I can hear like original Ellie coming from her. So I mean, I do think it's maybe a valid critique that since the episode's so short, that I was a little disappointed when these like two, because it's sort of split up by the opening credits. There's like a flashback of her being chased and bit and delivering the baby, and then the scenes where Marlene comes and takes the baby afterwards. Like, by the time all that stuff's finished, you're 10 minutes into the episode, and the episode's only 43 minutes long. So it does feel like it takes up too much time. Like, if this was a full hour long episode or whatever, like, I'd be fine with these scenes. I think they're interesting. They kind of go with like a blade thing, because I had kind of like a moment, because this is not in the game. These flashbacks are not in the game, and it was kind of like an interesting moment when I realized that her mother was bit right before she was giving birth, or kind of during giving birth. You know, the idea that the tension of like fighting off the infected sort of, you know, made her pass the child out, but she's still connected by the umbilical cord, right? And that's something that's brought up. She says to Marlene that it was already cut before she was bit, and we know that's not true because we saw it happen. And I'm like, oh, this is what they're saying. Like, they're actually giving us an answer as to why Ellie's immune. It's not just a random biological thing, which is the impression that I think I got in the game. They're saying that no, this is kind of like Blade, and that she was bitten right before giving birth. And on some level, Ellie had a little bit of something in her from that has made her develop an immunity, right? And then it's explained a bit better by Marlene later. That the infection just kind of thinks she's already infected or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording, but it made sense. It made sense in the dialogue, and it made it quite clear that this has a really good chance of working, right? If they can mimic this. And this is maybe why Marlene was so determined in the first place, is because she understood in some level that, you know, she understood the context of her birth. Fine, right? That's all fine stuff. I think what's interesting about all that is that it does make it more likely that it's going to succeed, and therefore makes it more challenging to agree with Joel. Although I do think that it does present, you know, like, so they don't tell Ellie that it's going to kill her. She doesn't know that, right? And Marlene makes a point of saying that they didn't tell her because they didn't want her to be scared, right? They didn't want her to go to sleep being afraid. She's making this choice and she'll just never wake up. And Joel, of course, says after he's got her back that hey, you know, you never gave her a choice. You know, that's not, I think it's, the exact line was, that's not a choice for you to make. And then Marlene hits back with, or you. And they're both right. But Marlene also says, you know what choice she would want to make, though. She would want to do the right thing. And yeah, she might. But I'm going to pose like an interesting wrench into this conversation, is that should a 14-year-old, especially a 14-year-old who's just been through so much trauma, specifically the stuff with David recently has really, you know, done a number on her, understandably. So, you know, she's got PTSD at the very least. Should a 14-year-old with these severe experiences that she's still trying to get over and process, should she be able to consent to a choice like this? And that's not to say that I'm saying that Marlene or Joel should be making the choice for her. I guess what I'm saying is that this should be put on hold until she's at least 18. And then give her the choice. I mean, I think that's the, if you're looking at it from a sort of very objective, like, you know, outside view, that's the logical choice. But I think, obviously, this is a story with characters, right? And this is a story that we've been following Joel. And this episode makes it very clear how much he cares for Ellie now, and how much he is bonded with her. And there's so many little things early in the episode where he's trying to cheer her up. The Chef Boyardee comes back. He's trying to like talk to her about playing guitar, and he wants to teach her. And he's doing all these things. He's making these plans for the future. And there's obviously some very specific, you know, poignant conversations they have that I'll get to in a bit. But it's all these things to show just how much she means to him now. That she is now his world. That she is now the person he's there to protect. And he's already lost a daughter once, and he's not going to lose her again. So even if you think Joel's wrong, I think you can sympathize why Joel makes this choice, and why Joel, under no circumstance, is going to let her die. Because this moment in the hospital is the moment from the start where he's standing with Sarah, and the soldier's standing there, and he feels powerless. He is damned if he's going to feel that powerless ever again. He's, and he almost felt it again when they were going to Jackson, right? He felt scared when the dog was going up to her. This moment is him sort of redeeming himself and in his own kind of like mind for those actions, for those inactions, I should say. That's what this is, right? And I think on a personal level, like my stance when I played the game was that, like, I don't care if it's right or wrong. It's so goddamn irrelevant. I don't give a shit if it's right or wrong. What I care about is, do I care about these characters? I do. I've bonded with these characters. I've bonded with Ellie. And because I've been playing as Joel, I feel what he does for Ellie to an extent. In the moment, all I wanted to do was save her. F the world, I don't care about everyone else. I care about her. And this goes back to, this is something that I've talked to on reviews for various things before. I've talked to Connor about it, for sure. This idea that when you're watching a movie and there's like a super villain and they say, oh, the entire world's going to be destroyed if we don't, do a thing, right? If we don't save the world, the whole world's going to die. If there's not like a specific character that we know that's shown to us in the story that'll die included in that world, it's hard to actually care that much, because it's such just a broad, there's not, like, it's just a body of everyone. It's a body of people. It doesn't mean anything. Individuals mean something. Individuals are comprehensible. I'm just going to move on. You know what I'm saying, right? So the individuals you can feel something for. You can't really feel something for 6-7 billion people, but you can feel something for a person or two, right? You can quantify that. You can understand that. You can feel emotions for them. And I think the same goes here. Like, I don't give about the larger world. I know logically and coldly why we should, and why it's the nobler thing to do, perhaps. But I care about Ellie as a character. And I know, obviously, going back to Bill and Frank, the idea that Ellie wanted to finish this. She wants to be a cure. This can't be for nothing. That's, the line she says. Obviously, she doesn't have the context that this will kill her. Although, I fully expect that she probably would still want to go through with it, right? But she is never given that choice. And that is certainly something that Joel should have given her the choice of. But of course, the Fireflies and Marlene weren't going to let him give her that choice. That's the big key thing in this whole thing. So you've got all those things swirling around. But as far as me watching the show goes and caring about Ellie, yeah, I am happy that he saves Ellie. When I played the game, I wanted to save Ellie. F the world, and F you guys for tricking us into this without knowing the full context. Like, that's how I feel about it. Like, the actual right and wrong is I don't know. It's such a weird debate to me, because it's like, is it right in the context of him looking out for that person? Because this is the thing. You can look at this as him not respecting her wishes, and him, especially when he lies to her about it afterwards. That's the part where it feels a bit more murky, where he's maybe doing something wrong. To me, like, not that I'm saying him going through the hospital killing a bunch of people has no murkiness to it. I just mean, in terms of me feeling like he's betraying her, that's the moment where it feels like he's doing something wrong as far as she's concerned. But this whole show, well, we have the example of Bill and Frank, and Bill having to accept what Frank wanted at the end and going peacefully together. We also have this idea of, like, Joel being here to protect Ellie, and he found someone to protect, and Bill wanted to protect Frank, and hell, even what was the other example? We've had Kathleen wanting to protect her brother. We've had other people wanting to protect people. Sam and Henry, all these characters. There is, like, an argument here that Joel is the ultimate protector, and that this big sequence in this final part of the story is like him, like, fulfilling that role and going above and beyond, that even in the face of all this, he's still going to protect her no matter what, because that's ultimately, like, who he is. And he's fulfilling, at least in his mind, at the very least, that's what he's doing. I don't know, it's an interesting thing to think about for me. I am far more interested, or I'm far more concerned with him betraying what Ellie feels than I am about the objective right or wrong. The objective right or wrong, I don't think is that important. We can debate all day, about saving an individual that letting die would save the whole world. I think almost everyone in the moment would save the person they care about rather than save the world. That is, like, an impossible situation. What's more interesting to me is what choices is he making that is betraying what Ellie wants and what Ellie thinks. And on some level, like a father sometimes has to do for a child, at what point are you stopping them from doing something for their own good? Now, of course, again, like, there's a lot of debate here as to, like, should she be able to make this choice right now? Is she old enough? Is he overstepping by making that choice for her? I think if, obviously, in a perfect world, if she knew that she was going to be killed by doing this, and she was, like, an adult, then he would have to accept her choice. Like, there'd be no shades of grey, there'd be no nothing, but they never told her she was going to die, and she's also still arguably too young to really make this choice. The weight of this choice is too much for someone of her age. And don't get me wrong, she's pretty grown up for her age. She's been through a lot of shit. Like, no one's denying that. But fundamentally, there's too many flaws or too many kinks in, like, the sequence of events to just sort of, like, say that he's just completely done something wrong. You can say that overall he still shouldn't have acted, but fundamentally, I think there's enough there to sort of, like, give him the reasonable doubt, if you will. But yeah, so yeah, you care about saving Ellie. That was how I felt in the game, and it's certainly something that I felt in the moment as well here. But I think that's what's interesting about the story, is that, to me, asking if he did it, if he was right or wrong, it's not really about, like, if you would do that or not. To me, because you're connected to Joel through the story, you've made the choice with him that you will do it, and then what the story is forcing you to do is think about, like, why did I make that choice? Why was I okay with making that choice? And am I okay with, like, the consequences of lying to her, kind of thing? Like, the force, like, making me think about my part in it, and making the viewer, or in the case of the video game, making the player think about how they feel about this situation is kind of the point of the story in general, right? Is the point of, well, it's the point of storytelling, but I think as far as that goes, it's why the ending's so good. It's why this ending works so well, is because it does force the audience to look at themselves and question where they stand on what he did. And I think because it's a show about two characters, it's less about the, letting a person die to save the rest of the world than it is saving her when she maybe didn't want to be saved, or wouldn't have wanted to be saved, and certainly lying to her after the fact. Those are the things. So anyway, I'll move on to all the other bits, because I could sit and sort of go in circles about that probably for ages. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of great moments. The conversations leading up to the hospital stuff is pretty fantastic. The giraffe scene, which is in the game, everyone was looking forward to, and it is very sweet. She borrows a couple of lines from the game. I do love that she makes it clear that, yeah, she's like up for like going with Joel after this is done. Like, she thinks there'll be a future after it, and she's like, yeah, I'll follow you wherever. She says that line, and I think the smile on Joel's face as she's like finally smiling because she's like with the giraffe. This innocent animal, this creature who's just beautiful, who's just peaceful, like finally like a beam of sunshine in her life after a very miserable time. And then of course you have probably the standout scene, my favorite scene of the whole episode actually, is mostly new. I think. I think in the game there was like something to do with Sarah's photo at this part, whereas here they kind of like elaborate on Joel tried to commit suicide after Sarah died. And he opens up about it, and because he says someone shot and missed, and then he reveals that he was the one who shot and missed, and they have this heart to heart where he talks about almost killing himself, but he flinched, and he got scarred instead, and she says obviously she's happy that didn't happen, and she understands why he's telling us. Obviously it's because of this experience with David and everything she's went through. She's feeling, and she's lost a lot of people as well, right? Like, that's something that she lists all the people she's lost at the end. And part of what makes her really upset when she's waking up in the car is the Joel's non-answer when she asks if Marlene is dead, because she's going to then add that to the list of names that she feels, if not responsible for, then at least the list of names that she has lost. But probably the best line of the episode, and one of the best lines of the whole show, as far as the performance goes, is when she says, so yeah, I guess time heals all wounds. And the way Pedro Pascal delivers the line, it wasn't time that did it, the way he quivers as he says it is phenomenal. It's, he's saying that Ellie was he never really recovered from the death of his daughter until Ellie. He's never been happy like this since her. And, he's openly talking about Ellie. One of the little things, actually, when we first get to them on the bridge before they come out of the city, is he asks Ellie to hold the rifle for a second, because he has to, like, adjust something in his bag. And, rewind to the start of the show, rewind to when she was begging for a gun and he wouldn't let her touch one. And now he's just casually, asking her to hold it. Not because it's a big moment and she has to take a gun, but just because, hey, hold this. It just shows you how far they've come and how far we've went with all these little plot details. But yeah, the scene's phenomenal. It's for as much as I said, maybe the biggest sort of misstep as far as choices goes is in this episode. This, it's right after this scene, which is one of the best additions to the story. And, I loved this moment. I thought it was perfect. Also, shout out, we finally got him boosting Ellie up to drop down a ladder. That's something you do a bunch of times in the game. I practically started laughing when he's like, hey, if I can get you up there, you can get that ladder down to me. I'm like, holy shit, they finally did this. That made me smile. I was into that. All very good. And of course, the big conversation at the end. Which is mostly just taken from the game. There's a little flourish here or there that's been changed, but this wonderful idea where Joel on the way as they're walking to Tommy's is openly, not only openly talking about Sarah, but actually kind of comparing her to Ellie and like sort of saying how like they would have liked each other. And it's kind of sweet in you know, in a way. And he's kind of like stumbling over his words as he's trying to assure Ellie that he's not comparing her to her in a way that's like, oh, like, you know, that's all you are to me is like a comparison to my daughter. He's very clearly trying to sort of be open about her because he's happy to finally feel this again with someone else. And he's like, hey, no, you're different. You know, you're not as girly as she was. And you're really funny. And she would have liked that. And, you know, it feels like a big deal that he's openly talking about any of this. And saying, just saying these things. It just shows what Ellie's made in his life. Like that she is this light in his life. You know, as the light, you know, the title says, look for the light. And you know, that was, you know, the first episode's title was was it the second episode that had the slogan that was about looking for the light in the darkness? I can't remember, but you know, full circle, all that stuff. But yeah, the ending moment is the ending moment from the game, which is Ellie asking, you know, swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies was true. To which Joel says, I swear. And Ellie takes a beat and says, okay. Cut to credits, right? What's so beautiful about this is, you know, I remember when the game came out and the ending hit, or, you know, everyone was finishing the game and we were talking about the ending at the time. And there was kind of this idea of the question, does Ellie know? You know, which she says okay, but is she saying okay because she believes him, or is she saying okay because she's just accepting the lie? She's accepting what he's telling her to now live this life. And I think in the show it's actually really clear. Like I think in the show it's very obvious from the performance that Ellie knows that he's lying. That she knows that this is bullshit. There was a moment back at the start of episode 6 where she says she's asking how the dam works, how it creates electricity, and Joel says, don't ask me because I don't know. And Ellie said, you know, you could have just made something up. I would have believed you. I thought that was a wonderful bit of foreshadowing for this ending, where, you know, she does know he's lying, but she's choosing to go with the pretense that she does believe him. And we can you know, we can analyze a number of reasons for that. You know, he's saying to her that if you keep going, you'll find something else to fight for, someone to live for, that kind of thing. You know, they're going back to Tommy's. We see Tommy's, you know, we see oh god, Jackson. I'm just trying to remember the name of the town. We see Jackson down below in the hill. You know, they really framed this very similar to how the game did it. And it's you know, this ending's perfect. It was perfect in the game. It's still perfect here. It's what the story has been about the whole time, and everything. You know, every episode when I was talking about the themes and I was talking about the, you know, finding someone else and the fear of losing them, and the revenge when you do lose them, and the anger when you lose them, like all of it was building to these decisions that these two characters are making in the finale. It's Joel's decision to save her no matter what. It's Ellie's decision to quote unquote believe him here at the end. Joel's decision to lie to her. All of it was building to these moments, and what it's saying about, you know, the Joel has found someone and he's so scared of losing her that, you know, it was never a question to him that he was going to go save her. He was just waiting for his moment. There was no doubt in his mind that that's what he's doing. You know, he doesn't even pretend, you know, because he could have tried to bluff so they wouldn't have, like, you know, because they treat him like he's hostile because he immediately says no, find someone else, and tries to make a move. Like, you know, if he was thinking about it with some tact, he could have like bluffed and sort of pretended he was okay with it, and then, you know, found, you know, probably would have been easier to find his moment. But instead, you know, there was just like, no, you find someone else, you're not doing that. So it's kind of wonderful, and obviously, like, I don't think it's even like occurring to him in the moment what Ellie asked for. And we have to talk about the scene in the surgery room, actually, you know, the end of the hospital part where he, you know, the doctor's like, no, I'm not letting you take her, and he just shoots him in the head. And then the assistant doctors or nurses or whoever they are, like, release her, and they're all freaked out because Joel has walked in and just murdered this man, without a hesitation, without a moment's pause. It's it is quite dark. And for the record, I think when I played the game, maybe every time I've played the game, I've killed everyone in that room. Because you have the choice. You don't have to kill them. I think I've done it every time, though. I'm so in character as Joel when I'm playing the game. I'm just like, yeah, you're all dying. And yeah, I know Laura Bailey was one of the people in the room with the mask on. He was a voice actor in the second game. It's not really that important here, but I'll just mention it because I know someone will probably say in the comments. And the scene with Marlene, the car is also pretty similar. You would just come after her, bang. That's very much again from the game. And again, Joel's covering his tracks. We see it during the shootout. Actually, there's a guy who like puts his gun down and sort of surrenders, but Joel still kills him because he probably assumes that he'll just be someone else to come after him like later on. He'll probably chase him down afterwards. He'll go and get help. He'll go get reinforcements, whatever. So. Same with Marlene, you'll just come after us. So, he's effectively ended this line. Yeah, honestly, it's weird to talk about the last episode. It's weird to talk about the ending of all this, because it's like I knew where the story was going the whole time. I know what the story is. I'm not used to talking about adaptations that are so closely, like, faithful to the work. But. As far as the season as a whole goes, I think it nailed the important things. It nailed the characters. I think episode 6 is my favorite. I think the conversation in this where he talks about his attempted suicide is phenomenal and is one of the best scenes of the show. I think when they did have clickers and infected, those moments were fantastic by and large. Especially episode 2, the first, in the museum with the clickers. That was phenomenal stuff. Yeah, they probably could have used them a bit more. I would have brought them back one more time for the finale. I would have had some clicker stuff before they get to the hospital, because I think what that may also do is like show, it can sort of remind us how good Joel and Ellie are working together now. That now when they encounter clickers, they've got a method and they're working in unison, kind of as one, and it can show just how much of a bonded pair they are and how far they've come. You could really emphasize that with them dealing with another horror situation. And I would have maybe changed how they handled the show in the hospital. That is one of the moments that is just kind of rang a little untrue for me. And part of it is like, yeah, it is so different to the game. And I kind of get that they're going that he's a man possessed and that we're kind of disconnecting from him a little bit to side more with Ellie, because Ellie is more the main character of the second game, so it makes sense she'll be more the main character of the second season. But it's been a wild ride. It's been very interesting to see a story that I do already care so deeply about adapted and mostly nailed quite well. Like, the big thing I would just say is maybe I would have had another episode or two just to sort of spread out things just a little bit. Mainly the finale more than anything, but just to flesh out just things. There's almost like a feeling in the finale where it's a little bit like the what do you call it, the crib notes, rather than like taking time to really sink in with a few of the bits. Because I didn't think the last episode was rushed at all with the David stuff. I thought that was perfectly paced. I think that was fine. I thought it was a very effective episode, and it didn't outstay its welcome by any means. I think this could have used a little bit more. But still, though, a lot of great sequences, and the ending, the actual final scene is still phenomenal, and the performances of both of the actors is exceptional. I would like to just give a spoiler warning a little bit for part 2, the second game, and talk about something just related to the story in the second game. So if you've not played the second game and you want us to go away, totally cool. This is sort of your spoiler warning for the second video game. I won't really mention much about the game itself, admittedly, but I'm going to have to refer to some characters and some things that we're building up to. So, yeah, the thing I wanted to talk about, obviously, I think people were expecting maybe I think there was a lot of expectations they might show a young version of Abby. who's a character in the second game. Maybe, you know, somewhere in the hospital or something. And they didn't do it. They, at least as far as I could tell, they didn't do it. I didn't notice anything that hinted at any Abby. I think what's interesting is the doctor, of course, is kind of important here. The doctor of the issues doesn't seem that important in the moment if you've not played the second game, but retroactively becomes quite important. And I thought it was interesting him having that moment of like defiance where he believes in what he's doing. He believes that he's doing the right thing. That's what I got from that moment. I got that the doctor, he's not just some mad scientist who wants to kill Ellie. He's sticking to his guns because he believes that he's about to maybe save the world, and he thinks that's important. And obviously that's what Marlene feels, and so on. But that's what I got. I got this was a man who believed in what he was doing. And I got that from a single line of dialogue, which is quite good. That's quite impressive. But it did also make the kill of him stand out just a little bit more, which I think is good for getting into the second season, because obviously it's going to be very important for another character. So I think that's cool, and I'm excited to see what they can do with that. But yeah, that was basically it. I didn't really have much more I wanted to say about the second game. But I think that's the big thing, because that's the link to the story in the second game, is the death of that guy. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, to be honest. It's been a great time watching this week to week. I've had a blast with it, and you know, even with a couple of nitpicks of the finale, it's very much like a prestige adaptation of a story I love. So. And I'm thankful we got something that was so high in quality. And I'm excited to see what they do with Season 2. I know they're going to split the second game into 2 seasons, or something thereabouts, because the second game is much longer, much bigger. And I expect they're going to want to do justice to all that, and all the story that's in it. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah. It is almost daunting talking about, like, it's kind of like when you go back and review like a classic movie, like going back and reviewing, I don't know, like Citizen Kane. It's like, what did I say about Citizen Kane that every, you know, film scholar in the last century hasn't already said? It's a little bit daunting in a weird way. No, I'm saying Last of Us is up there, but Last of Us in some ways is video games. He's Citizen Kane, like like it's maybe not that ridiculous a comparison, but. It you know, it is a little bit daunting in the same that I'm already so familiar with the story that, you know, part of what I do when I'm reviewing and analyzing is I'm talking about how much the story works for me. But here it's kind of a little bit different, because the story, I already know what the story is, so it's more about how they choose to handle the various moments of the story. And, you know, I've tried to not make this just about comparing it to the game. I think this last episode I've done that a bit more, because that's really, you know, what I have left. I think what was so interesting about all the previous episodes is that I was talking about how they're setting up the themes, and they're kind of foreshadowing choices, and they're foreshadowing the ideas in interesting ways that were different to the game, but I didn't have to mention that they were different necessarily. Whereas here, you know, at the end, I'm like, okay, what I've got here is the comparison between the way the game handled it and the way the show handles it. And I'd be very curious to see from people who haven't played the game how effective this ending was, and how the story of Joel and Ellie wrapped up, and how you felt about it as a whole. I'd be really fascinated to see that, actually. So that said, those people have probably left already, because I said spoilers for the second game, so that's understandable. But by all means, let me know what you thought of the episode and the season in the comments. We'll of course be back for season 2 when it happens, in about 2.5 years probably, knowing what these HBO shows are like schedule wise these days. But thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell. But of course, you can do it by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us over there for as little as, well, the first tier's $3. But you can sign up for $1 if you want to. But that's me. So thank you very much for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?